The participation of the writer in live television was, in those days for me, similar to theater. In other words, you rehearsed with them, you readings with them. When it came to film, in my particular, I can't say this is true of everyone, because I went with Hecht Lancaster and they brought me on the set. They worked with me on the story, Jim Hill especially, worked with me on the screenplay, and Lancaster put in whatever he wanted to put in, and Harold Hecht too. But when it came to the set, only a very few times is visiting the set. Probably because I was working on another picture by that time, for them. Then when it comes to long-term television, it all depends upon the director and the producer. I always ask them, please, at least have a reading, because it makes a difference to the writer when he can hear it. He thinks he hears it, and when he's writing it, he can hear it for himself. But when they sit around the table and they start reading it, you can hear things, oh, that's not quite working. That is not quite working. And you make a little note of it. And that is working. And that's coming through well. And then you speak and you make little notes. And so when the hearing is over, reading's over, even without a rehearsal, you can do things to the script from what you hear. Now, with American actors, it's more difficult, because they are not apt to give you any kind of performance. They'll give you a half. Some they vary, but a lot of them, and some just mumble. They don't want to get into it. But you can still, in spite of that, get a feeling. British actors are marvelous. British actors go over to London, they sit around. It's just marvelous. It's wonderful. And then they're the first, that come over to you. I say, John, this doesn't work at all, and that kind of thing, And so working with them in long form, and especially in long form and in 2 hours, is for me different than a feature writing was. I do remember I came down. I was working on a film called The Unforgiven. I was just doing rewrites, not a credit, but I was doing rewrites down there. And I forget, Huston was directing the film, and Burt Lancaster was in it, of course, because I did all kinds of work for them when I was working for them. And they needed a love scene at the end of the film. They had a love scene, they didn't like it. So they said, would you write a new love scene? Huston said, come on, kid, And so I was on the set. They were going to shoot it that afternoon. They were going to hold off to shoot other things first. So I wrote a love scene. I turned it in. I sat down with Lancaster and Jim Hill, and they said, this is terrible. John, this is worse than what we've got. I said, okay. So I got back to my little trusty Royal Portable and wrote another love scene. And I brought it back to him. We're all sitting on the ground. And Huston says, oh, no, it's okay. I guess it's better than what we have, but I don't think so. So then around, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm coming with my third love scene. It's with Audrey Hepburn and Burt Lancaster. And Huston says, it's swell, kid. It's swell, And this I won't forget. Lancaster turned to me and said, John, why didn't you write this one in the first place? That I will never forget. Oh, yeah, that's right. I could have saved myself a lot of time. But yeah, working with actors, but I didn't do the times I have worked. I worked with. I was on the set all the time with the one in Oregon.
Sometimes a great notion.
Yeah, sometimes a great notion. I was on the set, and because I was living up there at the time and with them, and worked a lot with them, and was at the reading and the whole thing. Well, it's a good experience too. But and of course, what happens when you're on location and having started as an actor, you wind up in the film. I wrote it the first thing when the John Huston thing. I wrote a part. He said, "We don't have anybody to play that part." Huston said, "You're on," and the same thing happened on Notion and so forth. There are still directors that will bring you on. I recently, Frank Gilroy's son has just written Dolores Claiborne, the
Tony?
Stephen King, Tony Gilroy, and that director had him on this every day, worked with him all the time from the script. And I said to Tony, don't get used to this, because it's not going to happen all that often. But it was, it's one of those things.
And yet it seems so logical and so right that a writer can do the best.
Oh. I mean, but try and make them understand that. It's even difficult to just have them have a reading. Don't they want a reading together? Some Jack Smite was very good, you know, having a reading and have you at rehearsals, and Buzz Kulick was just marvelous.
Yeah.
Not only have a reading, have your rehearsals, but before you do a scene, he'd have you there so you can listen to it one last time, and the directors could. And no ego about, oh, I'm the director, you know, and I don't want the writer around.
They were from live television.
Oh yes, Buzz. Well, that's right.
That was
those
their
were, yeah,
experience.
Those were, yeah.
But it's a major complaint today that a lot of screenwriters simply are not near the production.
I'll tell you another thing I noticed in feature. That was just my experience, coming from live television, which is very much like theater, in which the directors, like Lumet, was very much involved with the actors. When I came out here and I did Run Silent, Wise was a wonderful director, but didn't have that same kind of contact, at least in that picture, with the actors. You know, they came. Did a hell of a job. I mean, it's terrific. But when I'm working with the great John Huston down there, and I saw actors come up to him, and it was just either a swell kid or try it again, you know, and it just blew my mind. I'm waiting for all kinds of depth of personality and all of that, and I don't know. I didn't see it, and. But those were two feature directors that really threw me, you know, and both of them, God. So I say to myself, well, I guess for features, what difference is it? I don't know, because what I did know that Huston would pull a trick, in that he would bring actors, have them move here. He really was great telling them where to go, move here and move there, so that he could bring them into their own close-ups, so he couldn't be re-edited later on by the company. In other words, say they would be at a distance here, and they move there, and they move down. It's just fantastic, complicated shots. And they come up to their own close-up, and they go, and hell, it was all one master, you know?
Cutting in the camera.
Yeah, cutting in the camera. And he did that in self-defense, I guess.
Yeah. In terms of actually doing it, sitting down and doing it, when you construct a script, whether it's based on source material, or whether back in the days when you did an original, what helps you most in structure? Do you get in the mind of the character and say, what would the character do next?
Well, that's a two-pronged thing.
Yeah.
I'm one of those that have to have, I know what the character is all about. I know, you know, what the character is all about, what two or three or whatever the characters are, but I have to outline, I have to know, I have to have some idea of that beginning and that middle and that end and where those characters are going to go. Then, when you do get into the screenplay, things don't always go with that. When I turn an outline to the networks, I say, don't glue yourself to that outline, because when you get into a screenplay, it's another. Outlines are a bastard form. They are a terrible form of anything. I hate them. They really should be used just for the writer himself and not given to anybody. A screenplay is where it's going to come alive. And I try to tell them that all the time. But when I work on a screenplay, and from the outline, I'm suddenly into the third scene, I'm saying, that thing in the outline doesn't work at all. Why? Because this character is much stronger than I thought it was going to be. Where that comes from, I don't know. It's because you don't, as you said, you don't start thinking about those characters in depth until you're in a screenplay, even though you have the structure. And sometimes, perhaps, even that structure can change because the characters change it on you, change it for you.
One of the problems with that is that networks and studios today seemingly demand the screenplay in the outline.
Absolutely, and they want longer outlines, and it just drives me. And not only that, they want rewrites of your outline, and then if they want rewrites of the I mean, what am I doing here? Writing an who's gonna act the outline? It's just it's ridiculous. Yeah. But that's where it's going. That's where it's gone, and it's a far more difficult proposition today. It really is.
I think writers have to sell the very views that you're expressing, that a writer does best by listening to it read and by working with the production
After you
company.
have the screenplay written, listening to it read, I think it's invaluable, but it doesn't happen very often.
On a full-length film, let's say you're doing a docudrama that is, just pick a time, 4 hours.
Yeah.
And you have your research, you have your information. How long a period of time does it take you to write your first draft?
It's according to the material involved. For instance, Fatal Vision had literally enough court transcripts to keep us out of our dining room for 2 months.
Yeah.
we stacked up court transcripts all over the dining room table. My wife killing me, you know. But I had to, because even though Joe had very good parts, there were other parts that I wanted to see and that I could use. And I would literally take far more time. You do take more time in a docudrama because of that, because you're reading other material besides the book that you're adapting. And certainly court transcripts are always a part of that. And Fatal Vision, the trial went on for many, many long weeks. Of course, it couldn't compare to the Simpson trial, but it went on for many. God, can you imagine the transcripts for the Simpson trial? My God, they'd have to have a warehouse. Yeah. I always write 3 drafts, at least. I always, because I just rewrite for myself. I know, oh, I don't like that. How could I have written that? Oh, that's terrible. And I rewrite. And so I always do 3 drafts, sometimes even 4 drafts. You know, I'm one of those persons that just hates to hand it in. But then, after I hand in what is my 4th draft or 3rd draft, what I really loathe is when they read it and they say, well, it's pretty good for a first draft. Yeah. I just want to, if they said, they could say anything but that. Yeah. Pretty good for a first draft. Yeah. Oh, it just kills me. Yeah. And then we go into other drafts and that's why I tell to any writers, it's rewritten. There are no written scripts. They're all rewritten and rewritten and rewritten.
Everything is writing is rewriting now.
Oh yes, yeah. It has been for a long. Yeah. The only time I didn't get into a rewriting situation was a miniseries in which suddenly, after I finished the script, they had to get the star. The director was there. They had to shoot it. Sure. We came in number 4 the first night, and number 3, and I'm saying to myself, I didn't have to go through all of this, and we still came in on top.
Sure. It's one thing to get notes from the director or the actor playing the part, but to get notes from the people sitting behind the desks. Who do not have to make the film. That's an experience, isn't it? I mean, that's...
Yeah, well, you know the old joke. Of course, the joke is, what was the famous actress, the story about the famous actress who came in and the boy was sitting behind the desk and said, now tell me, what are your credits? And she says, you first. Yes. I've written 3 plays, all during strikes. Yeah. And one of them I did a one-man show on Oscar Wilde called Divergent Delights with Vincent Price. And God, it just became a moneymaker because he opened in San Francisco, went to all the major cities, then went into New York for 3 or 4 weeks at the Eugene O'Neill. But then he took it to the colleges. And they seat 3,000, 2,000 people, and it's so much a pop, even though it's lower, and then you get a percent. But I wrote that, not with any thought at all that I'd ever even get on. I'm such a, I just admire Wilde's work so much, because he's just one of the greatest writers of the English language. Then I wrote another play during the strike, and it was done down here at the Circle Theater. Yeah. So my advice during the strikes is to get to work on a play. And so he'd say, you want to write novels in the narrative form? I have no feeling for that. Yeah. Anytime. But yes, you're right. I want to take time now. Yeah. I really do. We're waiting for a green light on a project I'm doing now, and I think there's one I might, but then I really want out. And if I work aside in my original form, it will probably be in a play form. Right. Even though it's far more difficult to get a play on than anything else. Yeah. Especially in this market.
Especially Broadway.
Oh, especially Broadway. Yeah. Oh, it's just so difficult. Yeah. So difficult. I was there last year. Frank Gilroy had a play on last year. I thought it was wonderful. Everybody, the play. One paper killed it, and that was the Times, and boy, it only takes one paper, Yeah. And then they say,
well, there's a tremendous activity now in independent feature film making of they call it low budget now. It's a huge sum of money, but it would be low budget compared to major studios and non-stars. Yeah. And it's a tremendous activity. Just literally dozens and dozens of these
opportunities there, huh?
Yeah, the opportunity is there, and if you were facing this with, let's say, original material, would you pursue that field? Would you go into
are you kidding? Any field, whatever works. Sure. Any field. I would look for the one that'd be more susceptible to, more accessible to what I'm writing, but yeah, sure. And the main thing is to keep writing. If you don't sell and you don't sell and you don't sell, if it's you're going to do it anyway. If you have to write, you're going to do it anyway. But I've taught courses at UCLA, And I keep telling them to write, but if they write something and it doesn't sell, and they fall in love with this one piece that they've written, they can't understand it. And it's difficult to give them criticism about it. And I said, you better get used to criticism, because that's what it's all about. Criticism.
Sure.
And then that's the end of it. They've written their great thing, and they don't go on writing. And you must do it right away. Once you finished it, try and get somebody to sell it, but go right away into something else. Because if you sit around for 6 months waiting for the muses to strike, it's even more difficult. There are people who have written novels, I don't know about plays, one novel books, or maybe just one play. For instance, Sand Pebbles, which was such a wonderful novel, and made a very good film that Bobby Wise directed. Right. But that was his only book. Yeah. He had that experience of that boat on the Yangtze, and it was just out of his gut. That kind of a writer, that was it. He did it, and I don't think he was looking probably for a career. That's what you said. What's the difference between a writer and a writing career? I don't know. He's looking for a writing career. Yeah. He was writing to that because they had to write it. Yeah. And that's a different thing. Yeah. If a writer could get with an actor, with some kind of an actors group, and they do his own material, it's to hear them do it, and something you think might work. One thing. We got time for one more. I'll tell you, when I see a director's cut, right? I see the director's cut. First time, I may have been involved in the film a little bit, or not much, or whatever, but I see that thing for the first time, and three things happen. Three things happen every time. Number one is on individual scenes. I'm not talking about the whole picture, but on individual scenes. And this scene, how could they have done that? They just ruined that scene. I mean, my God. And he had her move away from them, and you couldn't hear his line. It's just terrible. That's one thing that can happen on a various scene. The second thing that can happen on a scene is, that's what I wrote. Yeah. That's what I wrote. They got it, and so forth. Wow. Oh, and this scene, they got quite a lot of those. This could be turned out pretty well. Then the third thing is, it wasn't, they really did, they just took off with this thing, and oh my God, I didn't know it was that good, Yeah. Those three things, to me, every time I see anything I've written, in individual scenes, those things happen.
Well, in your first reaction, when the first time that you hear your own words read in a rehearsal.
You mean sitting around a table, yeah.
Do you experience that?
Well, you don't get that quite. I'll tell you why. Because it is a table reading.
Oh, yeah.
It isn't quite the same thing as seeing it on the screen and how it's really going to come alive. But what you can hear is dialogue. Sometimes dialogue, which may be perfectly good to you and maybe to somebody else, may not be good for that particular person. You take an actor like, some actors will say, there are some actors that always have to put in a penny of some kind. In other words, I think I'll go over to the store and buy some groceries. You know what I think I've got a hunch. You know what I'm going to do? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go. They have to fill this in because that makes them seem more natural. They feel more natural doing that. Yes. And they just fill it up with this garbage. And you can't do anything about it, unless the director sits down on them, and very few do. Very few directors are out there. They're not looking at the script. Directors never look at the script, what lines are being said. I did two things with Hopkins. And I was with her, oh God, because that's an experience to be in rehearsal with Tony Hopkins anyway. But I was asking him about that. I said, how do you, because each time he would do a scene in rehearsal, he'd do it differently. And I said, how do you work? He said, I work same way Olivier. He says, I work outside and then finally get in. And he said, what I'm doing, he says, when I'm moving here, he said, I'm thinking physically. He says, it may not look like it, but I'm thinking physically. I'm thinking, would he walk here? Would he lean on the table? Would he not lean on the table? And all of these things, And he says, when I get all the physical stuff down and I stare at Hitler's picture when he was doing the bunker, he says, I just soak that in. In the morning, and so slowly, but he's not looking at Hitler's childhood. Yes. He's not looking, except maybe later on when he's got these other elements. Once in a while, you're writing for somebody. And in that particular instance, you have that person in mind, and you have their speech patterns in mind, and all of those things in mind, and what they're best doing, in mind, so that But no, you think of the character. You think of character and the character relationships. I say, what's drama all about? When anybody asks me what drama is all about, it's two people who conflict,
Yeah.
and each one is right. That's what makes really good drama, when each one's right and they're conflicting with each other. And it doesn't matter whether it's a drawing room comedy or a Western or what the hell it is. If you want a writing career, well, you know the old, there's so many things you should do. For one thing, you should get out there and roam around the United States. If you're talking about writing originals and dramas and things from your gut and your heart and plays and all of that, obviously you should get out there and get on the road and meet people and talk to people, and even in your own surroundings, do that. And then, of course, the old saw, write about what you know, write about everything you know. But there is a living to be made on commercial writing, and and you find out what the market is, and if it's a like Rod's Twilight Zones, you know, if you saw Twilight Zone, said I could write a Twilight Zone, and he did, used other writers. They saw that format and they felt that they could do it. And I'm sure on situation comedies, my son, when he started writing situation comedy, he looked at I don't know, Cheers or something rather like that, wrote one of those, and they said, you know, whatever, and come aboard. So that's a kind of a commercial thing. But then you, obviously, you really want to write. It's the old thing about actors, if you want to act, you really got to want to act. Otherwise, stay clear. You've got to want to write.